Welcome to the WoW podcast, where we bring you inspiring stories and insights from our university community. Tune in for conversations about growth, success, and the power of communication in the academic world. So get ready to soar with us on the wings of wisdom.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Wings of Wisdom, the WoW podcast. With me today is a co-host, Chelsea Allen. Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well.
How is Stupid?
Stupid is hiding currently, but he's doing very well.
And by the way, Stupid is Chelsea's cat roommate.
Yep. Today, we are honored to welcome an academic leader with a remarkable 30-year career in art history, museum studies, and higher education, with advanced degrees from Indiana University, Bloomington, and an undergraduate foundation from Florida State University. This guest has held leadership roles at various institutions and led global learning programs to Rome and London. She is also the author of several publications, including Aerobio Symbolism in European Art, 1300 to 1800 in 2025. Now, in her third academic year as Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences at Ashland University, we are delighted to introduce Dr. Katherine Brown to the Wings of Wisdom podcast.
Dean Brown, welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chelsea. That's a very kind,
yes.
Generous introduction. Happy to be here. Thank you.
We're happy to have you.
Very good. Yeah, we're very honored to have you, Dean Brown.
You're very nice. Thank you both so much.
So let's start with your time as an undergraduate student at Florida State. How was that? And also, are there any memorable experiences that stand out?
Absolutely. I would say that those were 3.5, 4 years that were most pivotal in my life. And I think that would be true of our undergraduates here too. I mean, part of that is the age and the stage, right? When you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, those are formative years where you're making decisions that are going to set you on a path from that point forward. And so not only are you growing, while you're living, and you're making decisions and meeting people and learning as you go, you don't quite realize the impact that those 4 years are having. It's almost like there's a time lapse because, in retrospect, those years were short and they flew by. But I think the impact of such a short amount of time is something that is helpful for us to keep in mind, that our current students are going through that right now. It is a transformative period. So what makes it so? It's easy to say that and all these years later, but what makes it transformative? I would say number one is the mentorship. I mean, finding a faculty member with a discipline in classes for which there might be experiential learning opportunities, whether that's an internship or studies abroad or anything in which you are really immersed in that field, transforms how you think about things, even if that moment comes as a cumulative experience. I mean, you may have had taking classes in high school that related to that, or maybe, some of us related to the fields that your parents were in. I mean, it's not like that's coming out of nowhere. The foundation is set earlier than that particular time. But it seems to like those years are when it comes to a fulcrum and you feel like something is being realized or it's coming to fruition, and you follow that instinct and you follow that path, and then it's really just a path of amazement of where you can go. You start to do things you didn't know you could do, or you had an idea, or you had an inkling, or you had a hunch, or you had an interest, or you heard about that, or you read about that, but you didn't quite know what it was. And so there you are, and you're kind of going through this period where you are reading, oh, someone's had this thought 200 years ago, or I'm not the first person to go to New York. You realize that you find your place in the history of humanity and start to feel a collective companionship with people who are not only with you, your roommates, the immediacy of it, but also the long trajectory of human history. And you say, oh, I'm a part of something bigger than my senior year of high school. The fullness of it is realized around that time. So
is that what made you pursue that degree in art history then?
Yeah, again, that path started earlier than Florida State. My mother is a painter
Oh, wow.
and a bookmaker, or artistic books. Taught art for 30 years. She was an art teacher. She taught everybody. She taught um, younger kids, retirees, high school students. All sorts of people were in our house. Even she taught privately at home sometimes and taught me. And then my father was a lawyer, and so that looking for evidence, looking for analysis, interpretation, how do you know that? What makes you think that? Those kinds of questioning, I think, is the two of those things coming together. But when I was at Florida State, I didn't necessarily plan on studying art history. I had thought maybe pre-law, have some ideas of something else you might want to do, but taking gen ed classes, core foundation classes. I remember it was a humanities course in which it wasn't necessarily an art history class, but among studying, literature and music, and it was really literature, music, and art, like 3 different avenues you could study. But it was, during that class, we were looking at a painting by Goya, the 3rd of May, 1808, and interpreting it, going through the basic visual analysis. What do you see? Who are the characters? How do you know that that's the main character? And where's the light coming from? And who is doing what? Who's the aggressor and who is the victim? And looking for what in that painting is subtle, but there Christian iconography that is underlying a political event. And that did it. It's like, well, this is what I want to do. I want to start with an artifact, start with material culture, something that is an object, and look at it from multiple perspectives to glean cultural meaning and deduce inferences from that start from that object, so object-based learning. And so from there, I took lots of art history courses, but other classes too. I mean, I was studying Italian language. I took religion courses. I took history courses, and just found my way in that vein.
Very good. So would you say for you was more, the accumulation of your upbringing was, I'm assuming there was no specific moment that really sparked that passion, right?
No, I think it was a fulfillment. I don't feel like I discovered something that was completely new. It feels new at the time, but nonetheless, you can in retrospect, I didn't know it at the time, kind of look back and say, oh, well, this came from that, and this came from that, and try to put the two together. But as much as I love to read and go to museums and learn in that way, sort of an inner world, I do live in my head a lot, but I think it's important to have those practical experiences. And so, visiting an archaeological dig, going to a print room in a museum where you're bringing out the Dürer prints and seeing them. I remember at Florida State, we had a professor who collected leather covers for the Qurans. And so, I'd never seen anything like that before.
Wow.
And so, being in the presence of those objects where your intellectual life comes together with the physical world, and you can see works of art or books or cathedrals, or it could be architecture too. It doesn't have to be something small, but it could be a whole, urban scape of a city. But you start to see these as maps of thought and belief, and what was the underlying faith tradition that created this particular urban design, or the pattern or the calligraphy on this ceramic vase or this carpet or in the stained glass windows. So it's not just that you're looking at that object, but you're seeing evidence of a thought process, of a cultural history, of a faith tradition in those objects. And so that's really what interested me.
Very nice. Do you paint, Dr. Brown?
I teach my kids. Answer no.
That counts.
No. But I like to make things. I mean, I like to cook. I like to do the crafts with my kids and things like that. But no.
Do you paint, Chelsea?
I try. I'm better with sculpting, but
Okay, fair enough. Okay. I
Yeah.
actually used to draw, and I almost went to an art school after high school. I just, stopped over
Mhm.
time.
I think it's really funny how, as an art major, I came to college kind of thinking I wanted to, actually, my whole childhood, I wanted to major in history. Um, and
Hmm.
so I never really pursued that. But then taking Dr. Schaller's art history classes,
Mhm.
I think I've learned more about history through art in
Yeah,
her
through
classes
art.
Wow.
than in
Mhm.
any other history class I've ever taken. And I think
And
it's
that's me too.
fascinating.
Yep.
Yeah.
That
And
you learn
Chelsea is one
about
of
World
our,
War II. Go ahead.
I
Yeah.
was gonna say Chelsea is one of our most well-rounded students, really, who was thinking about majoring in different specialties and then decided on pursuing art,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
Chelsea?
Yeah. I've been through 3 different majors.
You? Good for
Yeah.
you.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very
And I
good.
would call that exploratory. I don't
Yeah.
like
Yep.
the word undecided, but that you're
Oh, yeah. I
exploring
agree.
and you're seeing the connection of different disciplines. They don't need to be siloed. Yeah.
No, you
Yeah.
really do.
Good for you.
I'm seeing connections through when I was a bio major versus an art major. I think there's a lot of connection between them all.
So, Dean Brown, what made you decide to keep going with your studies and pursue your master's and then a PhD at Indiana University?
Well, by the time I had graduated from undergrad, I was ready to, I didn't want it to stop. So I did an internship after my undergrad and before graduate school just to make sure that this was a field that I wanted to go into. So I interned at the Peggy Guggenheim collection in Venice for a summer.
Oh,
It was
wow.
the summer of 1990, a long time ago now. And again, short time, but pivotal summer. I
Mhm.
mean, it was, I think, 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll never forget it. And so we, we meaning the other interns, we had to do a blend of some things that were in your field and really exciting, like give a public lecture and learn to give a tour of the collection to international visitors. But we also had to do the coat check and the ticket sales. And, you had to do some things that were operational. And so that blend again of the practicality of it, that you've
Mm.
got to move all these people through a very crowded small space and make sure that they don't have their backpack and they don't have their water bottle, and you have to do some of that. But it was a really good experience because you meet people from all over the world and you learn something about art that in a time period that was mostly post-war art that I hadn't studied as much, and to be able to do that, and again, the camaraderie and the people that you meet that
Mm.
share a similar interest. I was convinced that yes, so this is what I want to do, the field I want to go into. So I went to Indiana, initially thinking I would get a master's degree and work in a museum, and was thinking about either Roman art or Renaissance. Those were the two fields that I liked the most. And, it was, things don't always go according to plan, which is a nice thing to keep in mind, that you may think you're going to go do this and then it could take a left turn. So my initial thought was that I would study Roman art. That was what I put on my application. That's what they matched me with a professor. And it's not just the school admitting you, but you have to have a faculty member who will take you on as a student. So we went through all that, and I get up there, drive to Bloomington, and that professor was on sabbatical for like the indefinite future.
Oh my goodness.
And so I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my goodness, I have no professor. So, so then you go to plan B, which is to do the Renaissance, which is, of course, based on Roman antiquity in a lot of ways, and certainly pulls
Mm.
from those themes and from that historical tradition. And I had Bruce Cole, Professor Bruce Cole, who took me as a student, and I was a research assistant for him. He was very prolific in terms of writing books. And I helped him with a book on, as a monograph on Piero della Francesca. So I did some of the search for images for him. I did one of the line drawings of putting together, disparate parts of an altarpiece, like a reconstruction drawing.
Mhm.
and helped edit with him. And and then I was his teaching assistant. So I remember there was one semester, must have been the fall of 1990 or the spring of 91, but too many people had signed up for his class. And so he had like 50 people all in one section, and he just gave me half of them. And so, and it was one of those things like, oh my goodness, but I'm not you. And he said, well, you come to my class and you listen to what I say, and you've read my books, and you just teach it. And so it was terrifying to me. But the one thing about art history is that you teach in the dark. And so the lights are off and you focus on the images. And so without any sort of attention, I don't like the attention on me as much. And so we were all looking at the painting projected on the wall. And I got comfortable in that environment. And I mean, the beauty of teaching is that you're having a conversation or facilitating a conversation about something else. So when you've got the students and yourself, and you're looking at the same image together, and the image by its very nature is still and is quiet. And you can look at it from all these different angles, and you look at the detail and you do the comparisons, and after an hour just flies by once you've gone through the content and the narrative and what's going on, and then you do the layering of the symbolism behind it, and then the technique and how it's made, and then what it meant at the time, what it mean to the patron, what did it mean to the person who who used it or owned it, or and so it's not even like it has one use or meaning, but the meaning of it changed over time, including what does it mean now. And so I spent decades doing that, and I still love it. So that I stayed for my PhD, and was able to travel and do my research in Florence and Rome and Venice. And so some of that was independent research trips, and some of it was with groups. But just taking, you just keep going deeper and deeper down, and so you've seen more works of art. Then you get introduced to archives and going into the libraries and going into the documents about the art. Can we find the original letter of commission, or can we find the any documentation about how this was, how it was received, where it was placed, who used it, who saw it. So issues not just of who made it, but of viewership, and how it was indicative of a thought or a belief system. So that's really how that went. I will never give anything in the world for those years. So that was, from 1990 to 1998. Studying with my professors, writing a master's thesis, and then a dissertation over time. It takes a very long time, and was working from 94 to 98. I was working full time while doing that. So
really?
Yeah. So, but doing things, in museums and teaching, so that it was complementary. It was not, something where you have a separation of your day. It's just that it's just what you do. So
very practical. Was that teaching experience that kind of made you realize that you wanted to work in academia?
Yeah, I did. I mean, my mentor in graduate school was Dr. Bruce Cole. And so watching him, I mean, he was very much a researcher. I mean, that was an R1 university. So if you for him, that was the most important, was publishing the books.
Research, yeah.
And teaching was secondary. I would say that he was more of a mentor than an instructor in that way. But he opened a lot of opportunities for us to teach, to be his research assistant, and also to work in the IU Art Museum. The campus museum there is outstanding. And so I worked in the education department there too, doing research and giving program-specific tours, or academically themed tours for other classes and departments on campus. And so, you learn by doing, and you learn by blending that, study and prep with the delivery. So I think, he taught me and gave me the opportunity to do those things. And I was a teaching assistant for some other faculty members too, in which I didn't teach, but I graded, and I met with students, and I did a lot of grading. I mean, a lot. It was these big lecture classes where there's 200 people in the room, and the faculty member was teaching, and I would grade. So.
You're doing the hard part, huh?
You got all the
Okay.
hard work.
But I tell you what, you bond with the other graduate assistants. I mean, my
Yeah,
office mates and people that I was in graduate school with at the time, we're still friends. In fact, just this morning, we were planning a reunion for the end of July. I mean, it's
oh,
that many years
really?
have gone by, but we are bonded.
That's
So,
wonderful.
That
uh-huh.
is good.
Was he in office with all grad assistants grading?
Grading and teaching and, sharing insights. So yeah, and I think, one of
That's
them,
great. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they're still working. One of them works at the Smithsonian Museum of American Art, and some of
Oh,
them
wow.
teach at other places. And so, good people.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's also a great network to have professionally, not just
Hmm.
as
Absolutely. Yeah.
friends. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah.
So you worked at Walsh University, is that correct? You were the
Mhm.
dean of
I
the
didn't.
School
It
of Art?
didn't start out as the dean, but yes, eventually, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
you taught at Walsh and also directed the honors program before
mhm.
the deanship
and
position.
yeah, and these were in sequence. It wasn't all at the same time, but starting in 2011, I was assistant professor of art history and museum studies, and then became associate professor with tenure, and then eventually full professor, and then after that, um, I directed the honors program, and really loved doing that. And but our dean at the time, over the following years, stepped down, and so I was interim dean for the College of Arts and Sciences for a year, and then they had a full search, and I remained dean at Walsh,
Wonderful.
and then came here, and this is my third academic year at Ashland.
Wonderful.
Hmm.
What is the most rewarding part of being dean and having these leadership roles for you and seeing the students, that you're leading?
Well, and at the moment, I'm hearing them. I'm in the art building, and so we have choir and band going on. So I see them and hear them. I hear them
Yeah.
more often. Well, I see the role is really putting four ingredients together. An engaged, active, qualified faculty, interested students who are pursuing their career paths and their passions and what they want to do during that pivotal transformative phase of their lives. And I'm always keep that in mind. They're here for a short time.
Yep.
They need a place, whether that's a physical place, that could be the band practice room, that could be a chemistry lab, that could be a debate room, that could be, they need a place, and it can also be a virtual place. It could be on a learning management system. For our correction students, it has to be that way. So, but they need a place, and then a discipline, a topic, and a modality, a format. Is this a seminar, discussion-based seminar? Is it a practical hands-on class? Are they meeting in a studio? Are they meeting in a lab? Are they meeting in, a humanities space of some nature? So those things, the faculty, the students, a place, physical or virtual, and then a topic, a theme, a discipline, what is the nature of their class. And so you put those things together and it's magic. That's where the conversations, the projects, the ideas, the experiments, the data collection, the analysis, whatever it is that they're doing happens with those things coming together. And so if I keep that in mind, that's the goal. So that leads to some of the other things that I do that can seem sort of perfunctory. So, doing contracts, I mean, certainly want to hire faculty, and that can take a whole academic year, especially if you have multiple searches going on. Sometimes they have to be carried over until the next year, or it becomes a visiting faculty member, but to pull your faculty together and make sure that those positions are filled, that they're strong. There's faculty evaluation that's not, certainly the tenure and promotion process is a part of that, but annual appraisals, nominating people for awards or certain distinguished professorships, being a part of that. And then just making sure that their loads, what they're teaching, and sometimes many of our faculty have administrative posts outside of teaching, so that if they're a department chair or they are, you know, organizing a symposium, or they have another leadership role, an executive director of Ashland Center for Nonviolence, or the director of the gallery, or these other roles that they have, that those are aligned with the mission of the college and the university, and that we want a smooth running engine, right? So get your faculty in place. We certainly want them to be able to go to conferences. And so I'm part of that process to make sure that they have opportunities for professional development, whether it's workshops on campus or a conference externally. That's good not only for them, but also good for Ashland. I mean, we want to have a presence at major national conferences. We want Ashland University needs to be at the table at Modern Languages Association or American Chemical Society, and even better if they can take students with them, and many of them are able to do that. And then our spaces, we want certainly our natural sciences to have modern, up-to-date, relevant, functioning, working lab equipment that can last for multiple years. Research projects are not short term. Oftentimes they go on for a long time. It's got to work. But for example, now we're working on a lab for our criminal justice program so that they can set up crime scenes and have a space that's theirs. We have music spaces that are very good, but we could still use a freestanding recital hall. I mean, you kind of look for what's there, but also what the possibilities could be. If we have the Hugo Young Theater, but we'd also like some of it to be renovated. So constantly having sort of a working list, or a capital wish list, if you will, of what projects are we could always use something else or be improved. And then if you go down the list down to topics and disciplines, what programs do we have that are meeting the needs of a global market? How can they be tweaked? How can they be improved or streamlined or combined? Right now, we're kind of considering bachelor's degree programs that might feed into a master's program. Are there some that could be combined? So in each of those four areas, you might have a meeting here or a conversation there or something that you need to do that day that's related to those. But those are the things that I keep in mind as to what we're doing and what the purpose is.
So there's the big picture, right? But also a lot of details. It sounds like a lot of moving pieces that you have to.
And then as the dean, you're kind of at the forefront of all of that.
Yeah, but we have a team here, so it's certainly a team effort. We have a new assistant dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Dr. Chris Watson, started yesterday, and so happy about that. So he'll be, for example, the point person for assessment coordinator in the multidisciplinary studies program, and certainly help to monitor our enrollment. And so I would say it's very much a team collaborative effort. So.
Yeah, Chelsea, I was part of that search committee, and Dean Brown did such an amazing job leading the whole committee, and it was so professional, so seamless, and it was just great just to watch you organize the whole thing.
We had a good group.
Very humbling for me, to be honest. Like just looking at all the pieces coming together, and the level of organization and detail orientation was amazing.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for being a part of that search committee. Those are really good conversations we had, meaningful conversations. To pull the committee together that has different backgrounds, different positions, different voices, different priorities on that committee. Is very strategic, and so when you have those different perspectives coming, the goal is to find the best candidate. And so it was a memorable experience on my part too.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of art involved in that, just the selection of the committee members. I think that was very strategic and artistic at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm sure Dean Brown would agree that leadership in higher ed comes with its fair share of challenges. In your role as a dean, how do you approach problem solving?
Well, you want to have the right people at the table to talk about it. You want to wait for the right time. A lot of times, that is key. Um, I don't ever want to lose sight of a goal or a vision of where things could be. You can't get frustrated and think, well, I can see where this could be. Why doesn't everybody else see it? It might not be the right time. Or you go toward it, you go in that direction. And then as long as you're going in the right direction toward a goal, you might have, again, twists and turns, and it might not look exactly the way you thought. But you want it to be the right, whatever it is, the facilities or an academic program. You want it to be organic and to reflect that group of people at that time. So I think learning to be patient is certainly part of that, and setting what the goals are. And you can't really do that without looking at or having some benchmarks. I mean, I look at other schools. I read their websites. I look at their catalogs. I look at what their faculty are doing, and try to get a sense of what could be possible. So learning to be patient, looking for models elsewhere. Is there, even if we can't emulate this program or entity exactly, could we do some version of it? Could we have some flavor of this? And so I think trying to get ideas, cull ideas, and make sure that they are in the right size, the right fit for this space, and this college is part of that.
Very good. It's always forward thinking.
Yeah.
I like that. Yeah.
Where do we want to be and how do we get there? Yeah.
Right.
What advice would you have being in a leadership role for college-age students?
I would say look, learn, read, talk as much as you can, and let yourself grow. Let yourself change. So, it makes me sad sometimes when I see students come in, and I'm not talking about necessarily here, but just in general, if they have a very fixed mindset of I'm going to go be this. And I know where it comes from. A lot of times, even in elementary school, middle school, high school, students have, they're asked what their career is going to be, fourth grade. And they're sometimes tracked in high school, or, you're going to go in this path or that path, and they're having to choose classes that go down that path. So it's not that I don't understand where those pressures are, and I certainly understand where and why and how they get to that point. But oftentimes I find when they get to college as a freshman, they may have already made up their mind about something. And that can close off opportunities to let themselves grow and to expand and maybe think about something that they didn't know about. So, my advice would be to let yourself be open to things, even if it isn't what you initially thought.
Absolutely.
Even if this is not exactly what you expect of yourself or what others in your life are expecting of you, that you give yourself a little bit of time, a little bit of slack. And even if you say, well, I've got this really rigorous degree program. I would be lucky if I got done in 5 years or 4.5. And, you have to allow yourself to take some electives. It's something that you're interested in. We're here to educate the whole person.
Right.
It's not just your career objective. I mean, that is the immediate outcome, and your degree is a credential that can be a launch pad for a career path. Absolutely. But your physical self, your spiritual world, your social life is also plays a part, and your health and your longevity and your sense of satisfaction with your life. So my advice would be to not deny yourself those things. And if you're interested in something, simply because you're interested in it, maybe it has nothing to do with your career path. Let yourself take the class. See what you think. And if you find out if it strikes a chord or it, ignites a spark, follow it. Could you not pick up another minor? Or even if you don't do that and you like to write, but that's not part of your degree path, you could write for the newspaper, or you could, I would just say, find a path that is uniquely yours. You can certainly augment your primary degree or major with extracurriculars, or with a minor, or with a double major, or simply you took some electives in that area, but you are a more well-rounded person and you know something a little bit more about that topic from a different viewpoint, from a different avenue, is invaluable.
Absolutely.
I came to Ashland as an environmental journalism. That's what I was like dead set on that. And then I took one of Dan McDonald's Foundations of Sculpture classes, and I was like, wow, this is, I never would have known that this was something I was interested in. And so now I'm a sculpture major, and I am a minor in entrepreneurship. I'm building a business too.
Wow.
So it's you really, like you were saying, like, don't limit yourself.
Yeah.
Don't limit yourself, or see what can be complementary. I mean, what can first appear to be disparate topics can be, a really dynamite duo if you let them be so. So absolutely, putting entrepreneurship and business skills together with art opens up the doors for you to be a gallery director or gallery owner or art center manager. All sorts of careers can come from that, in which you can be creative and practical at the same time.
Yeah, Dean Brown, you've led 5 global learning programs to Rome and London, and you're leading one is in May.
It's in December. Are you going?
I am.
Good.
Oh, December.
In
Okay.
December. Yeah, it's a winter break trip to Naples.
Oh, I'm going to the May one in Rome.
Wait, okay, you're going to the May one. Good. Yes, good for you.
What do you believe students can gain from these experiences, especially when it comes to study abroad?
Yeah, there's absolutely no replacement for study abroad in terms of, if you spend even 10 days, a week, a month, the length of time can vary. But again, I think the impact of it can last a lifetime. So especially going to a country in which your native language is not the language that's spoken there, I think that regardless of what the class is, or what it is you're there to do, learning that you can communicate in different ways is an essential life skill. And learning basic navigation, whether that's reading a bus schedule, or trying to talk to an Uber driver in a different language, or walking for miles and miles, trying to, not fall into a cliff or off a cliff or something. I mean, the physical aspect of it, the communication aspect of it, trying foods that you've never had before, different smells, different tastes, different spices, different environments. I mean, if you've primarily grown up in a rural or suburban area, to be in a big city can be a change for a lot of students. I mean, it removes you from any sense of your comfort zone, and you realize, to survive, I need to be able to get from here to here by this time, and I need to be able to look at this money that doesn't look like dollars and figure out how much something is worth, and how much, your budgeting becomes different now. You're not thinking, oh, I've got $100, but you've got 100 euros. How is that alike or different? How is that going to change my spending habits? So again, there's some practical, navigational, financial, social, linguistic challenges that you realize you didn't even know you could do those things. It's like, oh, I can do this. At the same time, you're learning about another culture's history. You're learning what they're proud of. You're learning what they value and what they don't value. And sometimes, it's interesting to even see, the basic hours of when stores are open is different, or different days of the week in which everything is shut down, or that a holiday that you might consider one day in the United States can last a week over there. And people celebrate those holidays in a different way. They may have a different focus to it, different things different kinds of meals or traditions or greetings, colors, banners, decorations, costumes, all might be a little bit different, even if the basic holiday is one that you are familiar with and have celebrated yourself. So I think, it sounds a little bit cliche, but it is true that you learn more about yourself and your own cultural inclinations, biases, what you might think of as your idea, or something may be so ingrained in you that you didn't even think that there was a different way to do
Right.
it, is challenged. And also, when you learn to talk with people, whether it's, whatever language or mixture of languages it may be, you realize that they are making assumptions about you that you think, well, just because I'm American doesn't mean I think this. So you can have those thoughts, and they may have stereotypes about who you are too. And
Right.
so to try to see yourself through their eyes in a cultural way, and realize that whether you like it or not, or realize it or not, you are being an ambassador of your country. And you may think, well, I'm just myself. I'm not all Americans, but they are. How you act and what you say, and how you treat other people and places and artifacts with respect. All that is you're reflecting of your own culture, and so you are learning about yourself. You're learning about them, but you're also trying to navigate some cultural communication, cultural thoughts that people may have. And so I think that's important to realize, that you're reflective not only of yourself, but of your culture. Sorry, light's
Absolutely.
going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I also like the idea of we're being challenged when we go to a different locale and immerse
Being a
ourselves
traveler,
in a
not a
different
tourist.
culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How do you see like study abroad, museum studies in museums, things like that shaping the next generation of students?
Well, I mean, museums are a lot like libraries and other places where they're repositories of cultural meaning. Um, and I don't feel like we can ever fully understand the present moment that we're in without understanding the past. And to plan for the future, or have aspirations for the future, or have an ideal for the future, or a goal for the future, is grounded in your present and your past. So whether you're thinking about your own career track or your own personal life, again, whether you think about it or subjectively or not, you are even the thoughts you have are culturally driven. And so it's helpful to understand where those thoughts are coming from. Why am I interested in this? How is taste formed? How is your approach to this even informed? So to be informed about the past, we can look at artifacts. You can look at, and it doesn't have to be in a museum. It could be, a freestanding sculpture. It could be a church. It could be a mosque. It could be a synagogue. It could be an office building. It could be a pathway in an urban scape. It could be the way the city is laid out. It doesn't have to be in a museum. But if you're looking at physical evidence of previous regimes, previous political systems of other faith traditions, and see how those are reflected in those artifacts and in those spaces, it can inform your decisions. It can help give you a grounding for where you want to go and what your part in it is. And so I think of it as a point of reference. It's not that you're simply having an aesthetic experience. That can be part of it. But it's not simply, oh, I think this is beautiful. It might start with that, but it has meaning beyond that. So, in what part of your culture even leads you to think that could be considered beautiful at all in the first place? And how might a different culture have a different aesthetic, a different value system that placed importance on these kinds of things? So I think that artifacts and art and museums are points of entry to me. They're launch pads. They're, a window into the 19th century or to the 16th century or to the 2nd century BCE or whatever. It lets me see The point is not whether or not I like it or whether or not I think it's beautiful. That isn't the point. The point is that I would like to gain meaning and insight into what it felt like to be in archaic Greece in the 6th century BCE. How was it viewed to them?
Yeah.
What about somebody in a monastic setting writing and doing illuminated manuscripts in the 8th or 9th century? Why did they use this kind of script? Why is it on this type of vellum? Why is it this particular passage or this particular prayer or this particular illumination? So you take yourself out of it. You think of yourself as like, I am the vehicle for understanding this, but it's not about my personal fulfillment. I'm here to interpret this as a slice of thought and ideas from that particular place and time.
History, yeah.
And and it opens up the world to you. And it's a beautiful thing. And so
it's a completely different lens.
Completely different lens.
From how the public sees things.
Yeah. I think everybody could benefit from thinking that way about more things.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that you see that and have that explanation. Yeah.
Katherine Brown, speaking of writing, you are a writer. You have authored several books on art history, and I'd like to know more about your writing process. What's that like? Do you have a routine, or is it more of an organic process? When you're deep in the writing phase, do you have, let's say, certain go-to habits like favorite writing spot, or listen to music playlists? Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah, all that. I mean, each book was a little bit different. I mean, the first one, the Self-Portraiture in Renaissance Venice, was a condensed version of my dissertation. So, you can go to the IU library, and my dissertation is different than the book form. So I would say that was an adaptation written for still a scholarly audience, but one that's not as academic. And then the other ones, I mean, there was a gap of time. So if you look at that, that first one came out in the year 2000 from Leo S. Olsky Press in Florence. The second one was, 2015, 17, somewhere in there. And so you think, okay, what happened during that 15 years? Well, I was thinking. I know it's like you accumulate, at least in art history, maybe it's different in a different discipline, but you accumulate over time images in your head. And so, you could be teaching a class, leading a group tour, you're making a museum or library visit on your own. Sometimes I'm taking my kids, whatever. But over time, you're connecting the dots and looking for themes and coming up with basically, ways to group these, looking for themes. So I would say that the first part of the answer to your question is give yourself time to look and think and write. And, it's not like you can say necessarily, okay, July 1st, I'm going to start doing this. It doesn't happen like that. It's, all the time you're thinking about ideas. And then, once you start digging into the library database and journal databases to see, okay, your first 3 thoughts, somebody's already written about those. And somebody wrote about it very well and spent their whole career about that niche topic. Okay, whether you kind of tweak it and you move on, or you come up with a different angle. And all that takes time. And you have to give yourself that time. So even though I wasn't writing during then, the ideas were formulating and the images that I wanted to talk about were there. So, when I finally sat down to write that, I forgot how long it took. It took a while, 2 or 3 years, but it was like the fulfillment of all of those previous years of thinking about it and keeping notes and journals and image databases on my computer. And so you start to pull from it. And then, you have to initially just write it out, which can be rough. and
Mm-hmm.
the whole time you're self-doubting and you're thinking, I can't do this, or this is too hard, or you start to realize, how much there is. It can be overwhelming. It's like, this topic is too broad, but you can go through all this, but then,
Right.
finding your niche, finding your take on it,
Mm-hmm.
articulating your methodology, coming up with your lit review where you can figure out where your work fits into that lit review. Why is this different? How is this project going to be different or new? That takes time. And then, with that book on Mary of Mercy, Madonna della Misericordia imagery, I found a publisher. Initially, it was Ashgate Press, and then in the middle of my book, that publisher was bought out by Routledge, and so I had to switch editors in the middle of it. It was
Oh,
difficult.
wow.
I actually had forgotten about that till just now, but that was the hard part of that. But then that poised me for the next book, because I now had a relationship with a publisher and an editor, and so as soon as I finished that one, I took a little bit of time off, and I think it was a year. I took a year off, and then started working on this Veronica book. So that was the same publisher and the same editor, different topic, and they have they're peer reviewed, so they send out your initial proposal to anonymous, at least anonymous to me. I don't blind review, and you take their comments and have to revise it, and that can be painful. You get
Right.
new people who are laudatory and think your idea is great, and here's some bibliography for you, and then one that's like, why are you doing this? And reviewer C, and so you get, and so it's you have to go through it though, and even though it's hard to read at first, at the end, I like want to write reviewer C so badly and thank that person.
Yeah.
So that person shaped it and helped it, and so it's that part as a process. I think another part of the process is finding somebody who isn't necessarily a peer reviewer, but is a colleague, a friend, who to read it for you and say, you might want to think about this, or point out gaps to you. Okay. And really just help you with the readership, because when you get caught up in your own terminology and your jargon, which is what you're reading in the other articles, but nonetheless, repeating that makes it so that it's not so accessible for somebody new. And I'm a teacher, and I
Right.
think about students, and I want undergrads to read the book and use the book. So you
Yeah.
go through and you might start with what is scholarly, but then make it approachable to students. You define all your terms,
Right.
and you give examples, and not just say, see figure 2.3, but in figure 2.3, I want you to look at this, this, and this, and really tie what you're seeing to the concept. And so I like to use a blend of primary sources and secondary sources. So you ask about process. That might, not only do I start with the images, which change. You might have your initial start of images, and you change it as you go, but you have to start somewhere. The other anchor point is your primary sources. So I would go in and put in my primary source quotes where I want them. And then if I have the images and the primary sources, the rest is, the secondary voice of me doing the analysis, and you flesh it out that way. But I start with those things, because I think images and buildings, architecture, those are primary sources too.
Right.
So we're going to root this argument in
Wow.
these in these objects or places. And we're going to add in our primary sources, and then I write around those things.
Yeah.
Does that help?
That's fascinating. Maybe we can finish with what advice, if you were to give one single advice to our students, especially those who have not decided on a career path. What would your advice be?
Well, I would ask them to ask themselves, what piques your interest? What spaces or places are you in when you feel most happy? What makes you excited to learn or to do something? And go from there, and go down those paths, explore those places. Listen to yourself, because if you know that, for example, you are happiest when you are watching the news, and you feel that you like political analysis, or you like to have multiple debates and interviews, and that excites you and you get interested in that debate, then maybe you could go into political science or journalism and digital media that could lead you to that. But it doesn't start necessarily with your saying, I want to get a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism. It doesn't,
Right.
that's what you end up checking on a box for your form, but it starts with an inclination of what kind of conversations do you like to have? What spaces do you like to be in? Who do you want to be around? And what do you want to talk about? And then, again, let yourself go down those paths. I guess another piece of advice would be to not, not stop the process of learning. Learning is not something that ends. It's not a final artifact. Even if you publish a book, even if you, create a motion picture, just because it ends doesn't mean that it's over. There's more to it after that. There's more conversations that could happen. So, my graduate school mentor I mentioned, Bruce Cole, when I was helping him edit, said to me one time, he said, if you want to learn about something, write a book about it, and you'll learn while you're doing it.
Wow.
Don't wait until you think you know everything and then do it. He said, you learn because you let yourself learn while doing this. And I remember that was a real pivotal moment for me, thinking I could do that. I could write a book, even though I'm not like, the expert on it.
Yeah.
And he said, you will be by the time you finish the book.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was different to me, because to me that seemed like, oh, that's too far
That's
away.
crazy.
Just
Yeah.
saying, how do you do that? You have to wait until you know all this stuff, and you do it while you go. And the same could be said of painting. You don't know where it's going to go, but let yourself go through that. The process is the learning. It's not necessarily the end product. If you're going to host interviews on TV, you may not know how that conversation is going to go, and you navigate it. And so let yourself be a moderator of different ideas and topics and images and thought processes and methodologies. And that's where the learning takes place.
Such a very powerful piece of advice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Dean
It
Brown,
helped me, so yeah.
Thank you. We know how extremely busy you are, and we don't want to take too much of
joy.
your time. So, yeah, this has been such a fascinating conversation, and we're really grateful for your time and insights and all the experiences that we learned today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the questions. Thank you both so much for the opportunity to talk with you and to our students.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Chelsea.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to the WoW podcast, where curiosity meets inspiration. Brought to you by the Writing and Communication Center at Ashland University.